Hello, this is Craig Mooney and welcome to the Rock tutorial here at DMU Game Art course. The purpose of this tutorial is to demonstrate how to work from a concept to create a finished asset. Here we have our concept of the Fat Stone of Cheery Joy, which will feature in the RPG Village project, which we'll be introduced to later, so enough about that for now. The difference between working from a concept as opposed to a blueprint is that we don't have all the information, so all the hidden areas we have here will require some imagineering. We have all this established here, but everything behind, that's up to us. Some of the key points we'll be exploring in this tutorial will be using our modifiers and vertex manipulation to deform our geometry to give it an organic shape. And after we've completed that process, we'll go over how to approach hand painting textures. Okay, so let's go over to the Create tab over here, and we want a box primitive. I'm going to hold Control and drag it out to constrain the proportions of it. Click to release, and then just drag that up. Then I'm just going to add a couple extra segments, so put it free on the length and free on the width. I won't worry about the height because we're actually going to delete these top faces, but I'll go over that in a second. Okay, I'm going to hit W to access the move tool, or you can click up here, or here in the quad menu. So there's your move, rotate, scale. What I want to do is I just wanted to get this onto 0, 0, 0. You can right click on this little arrow here, the bottom of the screen, and here. And that is the world position of your object in this viewport. So that is now on 0, 0. Okay. Now we want to convert this to an editable poly, so we can either right click again on the object to bring up the quad menu, go right to the bottom and convert to, we want editable poly. Or you can go over to the modify tab here at the top, in the modifier stack, right click, editable poly. So however way you want to do that, it's fine. Right, so I'm going to press 4 on the keyboard, or you can go to the subobject polygon icon here. I'm just going to press 4, that activates it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click this button at the top here, window crossing. When you're done with this, make sure you click off, otherwise you can get very frustrated. What this will allow us to do is to drag along one axis, and it will only select those faces, so like that, or like that. This should select the bottom faces, and it does, yes. So just do that, and then I can just put delete, and now we have an open top box. And I'm just going to get rid of our boundary box there by pressing J on the keyboard, just to help us see a bit better. Right, okay. A tip here is I'm going to want to be able to see the reference through our object. If you hold Alt and X, you will turn your object see-through. It's like X-ray. So that's going to allow us to manipulate this object a bit easier. Okay, well the reason we've deleted these top faces to begin with is we're going to be using a method of modelling called strip modelling. And essentially we're building the remaining geometry from an edge border, which is this sub-object here, and it's free on the keyboard. So basically it's just an open face, and you're going to be adding the geometry as you go along. And to begin, how you do that is if you hold Shift and you drag along an axis here, just one axis please, you have added extra faces. There we go. Just undo that. But the best method of doing it for something like this is that we just add the broad strokes in. So you'd use a combination of the move tool and the scale tool to kind of just push in and pull out the silhouette as we go along. I'm just going to actually edit the base of this object just to give ourselves an organic shape to begin with as we model it upwards. So we go to vert, just one on your keyboard or here. Just going to pull in some of these. Okay, so we go hold shift. I'm going to switch to the scale tool, which is R on there, scale tool. And because I'm holding it in the middle here, this is scaling all of the selection, not just along one axis. Back to the move tool again. And this is basically the process you'd use just to do that. It's pretty simple, really. Like I say, we're just adding the broad strokes, so anything like this we can add later on. Just trying to get the silhouette as close as we can. Okay, so for the top here we just need to cap this open edge here. So if we hit 2, we'll go to edge mode. I think I will select these 2 edges here, and I'm just going to bridge these, which is over here in edit edges. Just click here, bridge. It should bridge between those 2 edges now, so that's filled that in nicely there. Jump back to border, because we have an open selection here. I'm going to cap that, which is in edit borders, just here. So hit cap, that has capped those faces. Same again. Bridge. Bridge that. Move to borders again. And cap. So that's a good starting off point there. What I'd then do is I would encourage you to just to pull and push a few of them just till you're happy with the silhouette to begin with. Which I'm just going to do, and then we'll jump back onto the next step. Okay, so I've just gone around my model and just affected the silhouette a bit better. I've actually increased the size of the base for now, just to make the silhouette a bit more stronger. So what we're going to do now to affect it globally is add a freeform deform modifier from the modifier list here. Just go down to here, FFD 4x4x4. And what that is going to do is it's going to allow us to I can show you affect the geometry without pulling and pushing individual verts. It's going to do more of a global adjustment. When you do have it on, make sure when initially when it's active, it's going to look like this. If you just hit this little plus here, you can actually select the control points then to actually move the individual control points like that. Okie dokie. So, like before, a combination of move and scale. Just going to pull these out. Again, I'm using my reference to help me here. That's looking okay. The reason why I did that, increase the size of that base, is because I knew I'd be pulling this in here and I wanted to have enough room to see exactly what I'm doing. Just push those corner ones up. Pull these down a bit here. So it's starting to get a bit more of an organic shape going on. The one thing I might introduce here, if I could jump back down into editable poly there. Okay, I'm just going to show you very quickly a graphite modeling tool called Paint Connect. If you go up here and just toggle the ribbon on, this is where it usually sits here. If it comes up and it's not like this, it's probably because it's been collapsed. So to show the full ribbon, it's just this tab here. And what we're interested in here is Paint Connect. If you hover any of these, it gives you a full explanation of exactly what the tools do, and some of them have videos or images describing exactly what is happening. For Paint Connect, I think we do have a video. Yes. Here we go. So you can see you can instantly paint in vertices, or you can connect vertices. You can do double vertices. It's very good. And what I'm going to use it for here is just to add some extra geometry here. I'm just going to press F3 to go for a wireframe view. F3. I'm going to actually hold shift to get this in the middle here so I know it's all lined up, but then I am going to just select these, push them to the side. Paint Connect again. Then I'm going to hold Control, see a bit better, over this vert here, and connect those two together. So do the same for this one, hold Control and drag. So it's dragged in a connection between those two vertices. Same for those ones and those ones. So to disable this, you can just click on it here again, or you can just right click anywhere in the viewport. Now we're back into normal editable mode. Okie dokie. Jump into faces or polygons. I'm just going to pull this up just so we've got a bit more of it to play with. Here we go. Okay, turn that off. Going back into our FFD modifier, back into the control points. Like I say, it's just using your judgment just to get an overall pleasing shape that corresponds to our concept here. Okay. So say we're happy with that now. To approve of all the changes we've made here, so they actually affect our object, this is still in an editable stage right now. What we need to do is actually need to collapse this modifier in the stack. Do that with just right click. Have a collapse to is where there is more than one modifier applied to one primitive or object. So we can use to collapse all at the moment, so that's fine. I'm going to say hold yes, just in case we need to make any other changes later, but we won't if everything goes to plan. So yeah, we've approved that, it's collapsed onto there. And we should be ready for stage 2, which will involve more Paint Connect. What I would do, I was take a good look at this concept you do have and just think about where you're going to be putting in extra geometry here to really give this like character, and especially in this back section where it's basically up to your artistic judgment to establish exactly whatever goes on here must be consistent with whatever we see in this concept here. So it all has to feel as if it's like all one unified idea, really. And make sure when you are editing like this, you take a good look around it and not just working in one view. Like, say you just worked in this front viewport, it would really feel like a flat object if you carried on doing that. So that's why I feel it's beneficial to work in this method here. Okay, I've got the ball rolling here already. For example, I've started lining up these edges to correspond with the concept here. So you can see it's starting to take shape. I've also switched to facets up here so I can see where the lines delineate a bit better. And you just click up here to get that and hit facets. Okay. So once again, we're using the Paint Connect to add like quick connections and edges. So it'll enable us to add some some nice chunky geometry. So let me just get started on that. I've also collapsed the graphite modeling tool ribbon here, but Paint Connect is in the edit part of modeling here. Here we go. Right then, so you can see there's a nice big cut into the rock here that we need to add, so let's just hold shift. And then control on that one and drag that one up there. And control and drag that one. Then I think I'll drag this one to here. Okay, and then hold control here to add that connection. I'm just going to right click on the viewport to turn off Paint Connect. It's off now, it's not active. I'm going to just actually move these verts across a bit more so it adds that big chunk. I think when I cut one in here as well, it will give this nice chunky shape. Right, okay, so let's turn Paint Connect back on. If anyone finally wakes up. So I'm going to hold shift and just put one there. Hold control and then connect that in. You can see that's going to cut in now. When I recess this vert back, it's going to give us a nice like recessed cavity. Okay, so hold shift, hold control and then drag. Same again here. Right, so look at these, selected those verts. Now we've got those selected, I'm just going to go into perspective view. And on the y-axis, I'm just going to push these back. And let's just turn see-through display off, which is Alt and X. Okay, so you can see that's made a nice little cut into our geometry there. This is the basic principle of how you're going to add this extra geometry. The most important thing when you're doing this is if you create what we have here is an n-gon, which has got 5 sides, we need to resolve those. One quick way of doing that now is to just select these 2 verts and to connect them. You could do that with multiple ways, to be honest. But connect is one. You could cut that across there. I don't think you could do it with Paint Connect. Let's try it. Yes, you can. Wow. Demonstrates just how versatile that tool is. So that is one thing you need to bear in mind when you are adding in extra geometry and you're cutting through faces. If you are doing this and creating n-gons, you must remember to resolve those because they'll cause you a wealth of problems later on, especially with unwrapping and when you're exporting it with Engine. So bear those in mind. Right then. So I'm going to just add a few more cuts in a few other places. I think I'll introduce one into the back of here, but I won't spend too much time with that because obviously I need to work this in first because that is our established concept piece. And I'll introduce something here just to marry it all up together. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I'll see you shortly. Okay, at this point I've made some adjustments in our geometry using the Paint Connect. When you may have noticed, I've masked out the grey of our reference plane using an alpha. Just switch to Photoshop. So there's my reference. What you do is anything you don't want, you'd make a selection, and the channels here. In the selection area that you want to keep, you would fill it with white, just complete white. And how you create a channel there is you just hit this here, create new channel, call it Alpha 1. It automatically is named Alpha 1, I believe. So you would basically just retain this information here, everything else will just be masked out. And then you'd say this as a target with an alpha channel. Let's just do that. Yes, so the alpha channel is 32-bit pixels. Anything less than that, it doesn't send the alpha with the file, so make sure you do select that. Say OK. So let's jump back into Max. Okay, so back in Max, if you press M on your keyboard or go up to rendering here to bring up the material editor, I want to work in the slate material editor. And I'm just going to add the alpha. I've already got it in here, but I'm just going to delete it for a second. So here's our texture, our targa. It's a bitmap, which you should be used to by now. The great thing about the slate material editor is you can just drag stuff in. So I've dragged in a bitmap there. I'm just going to point it in the right place. La 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 la. Here's our target. Okay. So I'll just double click on this to bring up its properties. So this doesn't have an alpha setting here. We're going to change that now by plugging that into the opacity slot. Let's drag that up. So what we're going to do is, you'll see that the alpha is not taking effect on our plane there yet, but if I just click this to here, it's now using the alpha channel that's provided with the targa. Okay, so we can see that working. If that doesn't update, you may want to hit this tab here, which is Assign Material to Selection. Make sure the reference plane is the one that's selected. I mean, I've got this selected, but so I won't do that. And you can tell it's selected here because you've got this two band of colours here. It will usually be like this if it's not assigned to any material model or primitive. Okay, so let's just close that because that's all fine. And also, perspective. I've duplicated the reference as well, and how I've done that is, let me just delete that one. So I've selected the reference plane. If I just press E, which is the rotate tool, or you can click here, it's fine, or in the quad menu, it's just here. If you hold Shift and rotate in the desired axis, make a copy of it. So that's it basically. So just undo that because I already had it in place anyway. Press Z to center in our object. Okay, so Z again. Put into front view, orthographic. Incidentally, to switch between the different views, all the shortcuts are here. You can feel free to pause it if you like. Perspective, orthographic, top, bottom, front. Obviously, there's left and right, but right is hasn't got a a shortcut assigned because R is obviously scale, so you can always just do that though, up here. These little arrows up here, that's fine. So, okay, I've put the cuts in, I've moved a few of the verts around just to line up with this shape that we know is protruding out here, because you can see it on the concept. So this is definitely raised out from this back piece here, and it cuts in there. We can see there's a bit of a moss build up in here as well, and it's almost like it's had a few things chipped away from it, so it's chipped away from there and there. So let me just Alt and X to bring our material details back, because that's see-through. I'll tell you what, I'll just hide my layers here. That's this up here. You can manage layers. I would encourage you to start using layers in Max. It's not the same as Photoshop. It's a bit more obtuse than Photoshop, but here's all our objects in a list. You can add extra layers here. You can move selected objects. Let's just select that reference plane. You can create a new layer containing selected objects. So there's a new layer. You can name that. Let's name that ref. Oh, thank you. And that is now the selected layer. I'm going to re-enable that as our selected layer. You will always have a default layer in there which you cannot name and you cannot delete. It's a bit strange, but it's Max. Right click, select that one as well, and I'm just going to select this one. You can add selected object to a highlighted layer, which I have done. There we go. Okay. I'm just going to hide the layer itself. So you can see all I've done is just pushed a few verts around in the front orthographic view, and then I've jumped out every once in a while, put it in perspective and had a good look around it to see if it's shaping up how I want it to look, really. And then afterwards I went in and added a cut in the back here. You will find it's an iterative process when you're making things like this. You're going to go back to something because it's not quite feeling right. Like this feels more like a slash in the rock than an actual crack. So I might just jiggle that a bit around just to get a bit more of an organic shape in there. Like I say, I'm focusing on this front piece at the minute because this is, when you're walking into the village, I imagine you would see it like this with the stone hovering above it here. Yeah, let's see, that's good. Another thing, if you go to element mode, which is 5 on your keyboard, it may be something we've gone over in a previous tutorial, but a great thing that will help you with defining a shape is to add smoothing groups to it. Now, smoothing groups are assigned automatically when you generate an object or a primitive. Here is the smoothing group table here. It goes from 1 to 32. So, let's just go to faces and select a face itself. So, this face has been assigned the smoothing group 5. Now, smoothing groups allow, well, not just Max, but most of any game engine that uses smoothing groups, and any software that you allow to build geometry uses a form at least of smoothing groups. But it tells the software how to shade the faces due to their angle, really. So that's gone from 2 to 5 there, so that's going to shade entirely differently. let's make a box. Okay. So, like I say, it's automatically generated smoothing groups for you. You can clear them, but just for a second, I'll just show you what this. Each side of here is going to have a different smoothing group. I'll turn my wires off by pressing F4, and my bounding box off by pressing J, so we can see these clean edges here. So that's 4, 5. Nice little handy tool again just to get the selections properly here. 3. These are all going to have their own smoothing group. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to play with one of these. I should explain, I was in facets still. You might not notice some shading differences in that, because facets just shows each triangle, which is really good if you're making a rock, because then you can see where all the up-facing faces are, so you can tweak them a little bit. I've gone back into realistic. Usually you'd be within these 4. Consistent colours is pretty good for when you're actually doing hand painting, because you're just seeing the true colour, like the flat colour. Shaded, obviously you're getting the shaded information coming through there in the viewport. And realistic, if we have things like alpha maps and other things that are happening in the viewport that rely on realistic shaders, and that is what's going on here. But you can see we have got a strange thing going on with our smoothing groups here. It thinks there's a curve on this very straight angle, and obviously that is not a great representation of this model. So what I'm going to do is, hopefully to demonstrate this actually will work, I'm going to hit auto smooth. Let's give it that 1, 4, 7. Yeah, they're all going to have their own smoothing groups. That's great. Okay. Now, this is a very basic shape, so it's not really tasking much with smoothing that object. But when we come to, I'm just going to delete this. Turn my wires back on there by pressing F4. Now I've gone through a few steps of smoothing this because it has quite a few irregular shapes in it, because it's more organic. Max might not make a very good attempt at first of auto smoothing something. So I've stepped down. Usually the threshold's around 45. And for more basic shapes, that is pretty much where you should stay. But I've just knocked mine down a bit, just so it picks up more changes in angles. And then after that, I've gone through and just added a couple of other adjustments. Like, I want these ones to be more smooth, so when it goes on here, it does blend a lot better. But then I want this to be a bit sharper, like something has broken off from this area here. That's the kind of feeling I get from the concept. So you can see there is a change in the smoothing groups there from 2 to 4. It may be a bit confusing at the moment, but I'd encourage you to play around on some primitive objects just to test out like some of the theories, or if you're not sure, even like any of the graphite modeling tools, I'd get a primitive object and I'd just try them on that, because then you're not affecting or destroying anything in your model. And then when you think you've got a bit of a handle on it, just get rid of that. It's no longer needed. And then just try your method out. And that's the best way to learn, is by doing it, really. Okay. So yeah, here we go. They should all be 5. That one might not be, because it's got such a steep change there. These should all be 2. Yes, they are. These should be different though, because this is a change in direction. So I'm just going to click on these. I'm going to hit auto smooth, see if it. Yes. Turn mine off so we can see that. You can see now it's shading differently because it's going in a completely different direction to this front facing piece. Yeah. When I look at this concept, it's what it almost feels like some different types of rock are being crushed together, which obviously does actually happen in nature. So over like millennia. Let's turn the ref back on. Okay, so at this point, what I do is I go around again, just checking everything is going in the right direction. Alt and X to go to see through. And also I'd make sure I'm not creating any n-gons. Okay, so let's turn polygon back on, and we're going to go over to numeric here. Here we go. Greater than 4 side is what we want. This one, if it's to be less than 4, we want greater than, because greater than 4 is a 5-sided polygon or a quad. You just click this little arrow here, and if there was an n-gon there, it would have found it and it would have selected it, and it would show here. But everything's fine, so we've got nothing to worry about there. One other thing I'll just quickly show you, because we're still in the editing phase of the model, is I just adjust some smoothing groups, but I'll also just show you soft selection. So say I wanted to pull more verts over here, but not like individually. I could select them in an edge loop, but also I wanted to have it more of an organic feel, because that's what we're trying to retain here. I would go to soft selection. If it's just turn it off. If it's collapsed like this, you just hit the plus to expand that. Turn it on there. That's how you turn it off again. Okay. This fall off is the strength of it here. So if I click on here, you can see it's like a very hot effect is happening here. If I increase the fall off by dragging up, you can see it starts to affect more verts, and it's kind of like temperature. So the more it's spreading out there, the extremities of it are cooler. But as we get in towards the centre, towards this vert, it's starting to warm up a bit, and what would happen is that it is affecting more verts. Okay, let's just take that down a bit, because that's a bit crazy. Let's just say I wanted to pull this kind of area over to the left a little bit more. So that's how I would do that there. So still got more of an organic kind of feel. Okay, so I'm just going to turn that off and collapse that, and back onto faces, go into perspective view, which is P on the keyboard, and we can see this is very flat here at the moment. It's not really giving the right shape. So I'm just going to go over to the smoothing groups table here. I'm just going to auto smooth this face to start with here. So that's giving it a different smoothing group. If I turn the wires off there, we can see now that it's shading a bit better really. Wires back on, which is F4. Select a few more faces here, and I think I'll just go ahead and select these two. Just going to hide our reference there 1 second. And just click and drag this back up again. Auto smooth that. So yeah, something along these lines, just so I'm getting the feeling like more of like a chipped stone. I'm going to go around the model and just, yeah, that's not very nice. I'm going to sort some of this out. So I'm just going to finalize some of that, and then we're going to go over to just a step before we go to unwrap, just to make sure everything is all present and correct. And what pitfalls there might be before you start unwrapping, which is X-form. Okay, before we start unwrapping our UVs, let's just make sure to reset our X-form and to resolve any other issues that could have happened along the way. For instance, if you were merging two objects together, you might find that the bounding box which surrounds your model has shifted slightly. This is the model I'm actually using. This is just an example one I have here. You can see the bounding box that surrounds it. If I click on this one, you will notice, go to perspective, it's at a very strange angle, and my pivot is over here. It should be in the center or at the very bottom of your object, because this object would generally sit on the ground plane in an environment. It would be set up like this. So this is what we want. This is not what we want. So let's just resolve that. So to start with, well, let's just reset our pivot. So we go over to the hierarchy tab here, which is the third one on the command panel, and just below that is adjust pivot, which is how this affects our object here. So let's click that there, and first let's just center it to our object. Okay, so that's good. We also want it to be sitting at the bottom of our object. You can just type in 0 here, that's fine. Another way of doing it is just to right click on this little arrow here. If you do that, it just sets it to 0. That happens with most of the windows in here. I won't affect these because there's no point. So let's just undo that. So our pivot's in the right place. Now just to resolve the X-form problem here, if we go all the way over to utilities, which is the hammer icon here in your command panel, let's click that. Reset X-form is the third from the bottom. Just click reset X-form, then reset selected. You can see that's already looking a lot better. Look at that. There we go. Uncheck that. We'll need to go back over to the modify tab. So you can see that was our old X-form there, which is very wrong. Let's just approve of that because we know it's right. So collapse to or collapse all. There we go. So that's sorted. So I'll just go up to my other window where I've already got my unwrap primed and ready to be applied. Okay. Right then, let's just add our unwrap modifier. So we'll go to the modifier list here. You can scroll all the way down. If you know what letter your modifier starts with, you can actually just hit it on the keyboard. So there we go, unwrap. So it began with W, it goes to W, R. Okay, so we know it begins with a U, unwrap UVW, which is just here. But let's just hit that. Don't move your mouse. There you go. So I just press return to activate that. Okay, so you would have already used this on the previous project, but here's our open UV video editor tab there, so that opens up the UV editor. We can see that there's no unwrap applied to our model as yet. It will automatically generate these map seams here, depending on what primitive you used. Because I use a box, it's obviously used the faces of that box to generate these. We're not going to use these map seams. And what these actually relate to is these are seams between what we would call UV islands. So the border between these is two separate islands. But I'm just going to turn that off for now. You can do that just here underneath configure. So I'm just going to turn off map seams because I don't want to use those. We're going to draw in our own map seams, and to do that, I'm just going to bring this so it's better in the window. It's under the peel tab here. The principle of this is, imagine you had a glove and you undid the stitching along the inside of the glove, like between the fingers and around the thumb. Imagine that, and you just wanted to retain one seam and then just unfold it like the skin of an animal, really. That's probably why it's called peel, and it's probably why this icon looks like a poor skinned bear rug. But it is a very similar principle. So what we have here is an edit seams button, a point-to-point seams button. I won't go into convert edge select seam because I found that it's not very good. So we'll just avoid that for a second. So let's just click on this one first and just demonstrate. If I click on an edge, it adds a little blue seam there. If you find it's a bit hard to see, it might be that someone who's been on the PC before you may have turned this to thin. There's not much between the two of them, to be honest, if you see there. But do have it set to fix so you can actually see them. Alternative, you can press F3 to go to wires just to see that something actually has gone on there, and we can see it clearly has. So yeah, just clicking on any of the edges here will allow you to add a seam. If you hold Alt and click, you can undo that. If you hold Alt, click and drag, you can deselect a bunch. You can also hold Control and drag and you select everything, but you would never do this. What was the point of doing any of that? You know, that's not even a seam. So yeah, so let's just think where we need to put our seams to begin with. So the principle behind that, the general rule of thumb for placing seams, is you obviously want to hide them because it's where two faces are meeting, and that there may be ever so slightly like a difference between where they meet on your textures. So you generally would like to hide them. Obviously you want to make a best as job as possible of blending them together. But usually, like for instance, like character, you find seams on the inside of the arm going up to the armpit, and say on the inside of the leg, where the seam of jeans might be. It's a similar principle to that, because you generally, this is something you don't stare at. So why not hide it somewhere where there already would be a seam on your texture? So that's a good rule of thumb to follow, really. I might consider putting seams in these recesses because they'll be darker, and they'll aid in not hiding. I suppose it's hiding the seams, really, but they'll just cause less problems, and the eye will be drawn less to them. So let's just look at this. Right, where do I want to put my seams? Okay. Also to do with the way I lay out my UVs. So say I have one face of the rock here, another there, and another there, and maybe the bottom just lining up there. So let's start with the bottom one anyway. So we've gone over edit seams here, just clicking and selecting one. So let's go to point-to-point seams. So this is using the verts here. But the great thing about this one is, say I click here, I don't have to click on the next one there. I could actually click a bit further along, and it'll predict a path, almost of like a path of less resistance, but it's trying to make the most efficient path to somewhere. So there we go, that's all fine. This isn't really going to cause us many problems. So let's just, there we go. It's right click to, say I've clicked here, I get this little dashed line here where it's predicting where it's going to go. If you want to just stop editing your scene, just right click in the viewport, and that usually stops anything in Max once you're editing something. If you right click anywhere, it will just stop it. Okay, and I'll just demonstrate this next thing here, just so we've got it all, we've gone over all of the icons here. So I've selected a face in the middle of here, and I want to just break this off from the rest of the model. We can see here that the entirety of the model in the tiling space, in the UV space. I want to break it away so I'm not affecting it at the moment. So if you hold over here, expand polygon selection to seams. There we go. So I could either do a quick peel here, which is also here as well. It's a bit quick and dirty. Hit that there you go. Let's just turn the checker pattern on. If you click up here, it brings up what exactly is in there as well. You can actually add textures from here as well, but I would advise you to have already assigned a material with a plugged in at least some kind of path to something before you do that, because it doesn't always refresh correctly in here and it gets a bit confused. This is when you start unwrapping, this is definitely a time to be wary of how often you save, and maybe save sequentially. So if you do save as here, hit this little tab, it will add a numerical step after the title of your file here, just in case something happens, because although Max is a very powerful piece of equipment, sometimes it can just quit on you. So never let that happen. Always be prepared for that eventuality, because it is going to happen, and I'm forewarning you now. So that's it, you've been warned. So yes, that's okay there. Let's just look at this. See, we've got a nice even checkerboard there. What the quick peel does is also slightly relaxes the faces. We can see here these haven't been even addressed yet. You see how they're all skewed, all the faces are stretched. The checkerboard's it's just terrible. If that was a texture now, that would be noticeably bad. You've probably walked around some games and seen this and wondered what exactly is going on there. That is because it's not been unwrapped properly and someone's been very lazy. So now you know why that is, and you can pass judgment on them. Okay, so another way of doing that was the quick peel. There's the actual peel, the pelt map, sorry, here. So I bet you're dying to see what this does. Let's expand our selection again, hit pelt map. You get this rather strange thing here. Ignore this little thing here, that's a viewport error that always comes up with that. If you just zoom in and out again, it corrects it. This is going to try and pull all of these verts out to these points here. Like I say, as if you were like unstitching a glove, let's say, and just laying it out. So you start that here by pressing start pelt, obviously. Here we go. Press it again to stop. There is a relax option in here. I generally don't like the relax one that's in the quick pelt, in the pelt map here, because it tends to do this, which is not helpful to you at all. Look at that, and it's changed the orientation of your UV island as well. You can rotate them around here, but it's just very annoying, and the relax that's in this section of your UV editor is much better. So let's just quickly do that. Commit this. Let's drag that over there so we can see it. Go to tools, and here is either relax. I'd encourage you to use this one more than the one that's actually in Pelt Map. So it brings up this little dialogue. We want to relax by polygon angles. In previous versions of Mac they said face angles. So they're just changing the terminology there. Don't worry about any of this. You won't need to change any of this. So let's just quickly start the relax. Obviously it's a lot lazier than the other one, and it's stopped by itself because it's relaxed as far as it can go, so it's stopped, which is great. And we can see once again it's nice even checkerboard there. Okay. So, as I was saying before, let's think about where we're going to put some of these seams. I know from the concept there's a nice dark patch of moss going around this area, so let me just jump that back in. So this is the area I was talking about. I could possibly hide it along this crack here, because that's an edge. You can also hide an edge along a highlight as long as it's even. It's better to hide it in somewhere like a crack because it's just black. Well, it's not black, but it's darker, so it's a lot easier to hide it because it's less noticeable. But we could certainly start adding one there, and let's see how we get on with that. So once again, I prefer point-to-point seams because you can just step up. Let's get that one there. Let's see what it's like if I just do it across this bit. When you get more confident with unwrapping, you may find you will test out different ways of unwrapping. It's almost like you're trying to prove something to yourself, to be honest. Because at first it's quite a daunting thing, unwrapping. Let's just say that's the top of our... Let's draw that edge there. And why not, let's bring that down there. It's quite a clean cut edge on there. I'll just take it down here for now, just for the moment. Click to turn that off. We're in polygon mode, remember. Let's expand that selection. I'm just going to break that away from the rest of the model for a second. You can actually, if you click in the UV editor, right click, if it's possible, you can actually break faces off in that way. I think because I'm drawing seams in, they're not established yet, so I can't do that. If I'd accepted the map seams here, I could just break them off, but let's not worry about that for a moment. Okay, so push, let's do that. Commit it. Polygon angles, remember. That one to the side there for a moment. Like I say, I might change these UVs as I go along. It's just kind of trying to find your way out, find your way across this really, and an efficient way to actually place your UVs in there, because you want to have as much space taken up in this UV area with your textures, because you want the best fidelity for your model. One thing I am going to do is I'm going to pack my UVs in here, but I'm also going to leave a little area for the crystal that's going to float above the top here, so I'm always bearing that in mind. If you wonder later on why I've got a big space at the bottom, that's going to be where I'm going to place my crystal. Okay. because this is one of the other larger sides of it, the best approach really would be to just draw this up here really. Right to the top. Like I say, if you do end up with a seam and it goes off in a strange direction, just click back to the edit seams there, Alt. Just get rid of it and draw it back in wherever you wanted it. Just click in there, expand. You can stop this at any time if you're happy with how the relax is. I mean, luckily this is, it's not taxing it too much, so it's not causing any problems. So when it starts to spin catastrophically, you know there's maybe an area of tension in there that is causing it problems. So it's trying to relax all the faces evenly to get this kind of nice checkerboard thing. But if you look around it and see that maybe there's some stretching on there, something like this where you've cut in, you may have to possibly break off some of the faces and relax them and then stitch them back in. But for something like this at the moment, you're probably not going to be going to those lengths, so let's not worry about that. Okay, put you there for a second. Because all this is like of the same material, when I look at this concept, this kind of sandy stone here, and then we have this kind of cooler kind of grey stone, which kind of it's almost like resting on top of, like I say earlier, it feels like they've been like crushed together. So I kind of want to keep these together really for when I'm painting. Yeah, let's try that. So let's expand that again. By now, I probably would have encouraged you to save, since you've got this far. Save. In case it all goes wrong, you have to do all these steps again. And we can see it's spinning, which I suspect is probably this area here that's causing that kind of tension, and it's to compute more, and it's trying to relax more faces, but it's done it. So I'm just rotating them there. This rotating 90 degrees, left or right. So that's just quickly. You can either rotate as well on this. This is the freeform mode tool. You can scale, move and rotate all in one little gizmo here. So there you go, that's quite a useful tool. I should note, when you saw me doing that then, it was snapping, it's going up in 5s. That is because I've got angle snap on there, which is really helpful when you're doing stuff like this. It's also helpful when you're rotating stuff in the viewport, because it's rotating in even steps. So say you wanted to rotate something back you weren't happy with, you don't have to like remember it was like 0.5.37. Don't bother with any of that, just keep angle snap on. Depends how confident you are really, but I prefer to work with this on. Okay, so we've got all our faces there, all our UV islands. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just turn on select by element UV, and what this does is basically these entire UV islands here you can select, instead of just selecting one face or dragging to select them all. If you turn this on, you can select the entire island as an element. So let's just select those. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rescale them so they're all proportioned exactly the same. So it's just here. Okay. You can also, in this area, you can pack some of the UVs together. If you want a good starting off point for how to pack, because you've got to fit them all into this space basically, and that's going to be exported into Photoshop. So a good starting point here is if you just pack them together. So it gives you kind of a good space there, but you can also pack them into the one-to-one space there. And if you start scaling them, scale all of them together. Don't try scaling one of these, because if you look at the bottom now, this is completely different. The scaling for this is completely different now. So don't do that. Scale them all uniformly together. But what I'm going to do, which I think is important, for especially if you're doing hand painted textures and we want to reduce the amount of noticeable seams, is I'm going to actually stitch them back together. Just push you out of the way for a second. And you may think, why didn't I do this earlier? Well, because I wanted to relax all of these first, which would enable me to stitch the verts better. I found this works in this process a lot better if I do it that way. So let's just look at this. Okay, so I'm going to want to start stitching some of these back together. That's done by using the vert. Turn off element toggle because we want to select all the verts, just some. And another thing that's going to help us when we do that, because when we select the vert, go back to this move selected subobject, we don't want this active because it's going to have an annoying red box around everything we select. We can see this selected vert relates to this vert. That is actually the same vert. And another way of showing this, if you go to display, show vertex connections, that vert is numbered 8. Every time you add extra geometry to a model, it adds another number to the geometry. So 79, and it keeps stepping up and up and up. What I want to do is stitch these guys back together using Stitch Custom here. There are different ways to stitch things together. So stitch to target is going to push that vert over to there, which we don't want. Stitch to average will, between the two verts, it will find an average space. We don't want that either at the minute. And stitch to source is basically almost the opposite of that. What we want is Stitch Custom, which does a much better job, and it actually pulls the entire UV over, which saves us having to do that. So let's just look. I'm gonna, I think, stitch these back over. I think up to around here. This is also a step where, right before you do this, save, because say you have an extra vert underneath one of these verts, or something's not welded together in your model, it's going to pick it up and it's going to crash. So just be warned about that. This is a step where you will save before you do anything. Okay, so there we go, and you can see how it's pulled the entire island over and stitched it in there. And if we look at the checkerboard here, you see how it's flowing evenly into each other. If I just undo what I just did there, we can see there's a break in the UVs here. So let's just re-stitch that back in. So imagine that you're painting a rock texture across and then into these faces. That's going to paint nice and evenly, and this is why I would advise doing this, because any of those big areas you want it all to be even and have good fidelity, and not to be any like visual seams just breaking up that whole like nice paint job that you're applying. You don't want any of it to be ruined by just a dodgy seam. So that's basically the principle I'm trying to encourage you to try here, and to be mindful of how you lay out your UVs, because they are either going to be the downfall or the success of your asset. So just be mindful of what you do, and just use your judgment. That's what you're trying to nurture and grow when you do this, is a good artistic judgment, and be sensible. Okay. So next. Also, when you're in this, don't jump down into editable poly, because you may lose your map seams. If you get to a certain step and you think, oh, I just need to do something, I just need to move or weld these verts, collapse your modifier first. Okay, because that's basically confirmed all those steps you took in the editor. It's confirmed them, and they have been applied to your model. So say you've just removed some geometry or edited something, it might have affected some of your unwrap, but not enough that it will have destroyed everything else. So you see the confirmation is stuck. All those adjustments we made, they're all still here. So all that happens is now they've become an actual map seam instead of peel seams. So they're completely confirmed and applied to our model. So that's good. So where shall I adjust next? Let's have a look. So that's there. Let's have a look here. I think if I stitch all the way up to around here, I think. Just clicking and dragging, select these verts. Okay. And I would like to add the underside face, the bottom of the object, somewhere on one of these, just so when I lay them out, they'll be all around here, and the bottom face will be in the center of our texture map. And there's room enough for the crystal, so we're going to get a nice big run of the UV space here for us to paint upon. Okay. Oops, I had the vert selected up there. That's better. It's probably better you see things like that happen early, because then you'll know that not to do that. Okay, and another step I do after I've done this, select the entire thing there, I might relax it again. Because there might have been some tension created from one of these, and it might have upset the checkerboard. Upset the UV. Sorry. Yeah, so that's a bit stretched there. That's not nice. So with that one, let's select that. Just going to relax it again. Another step where you should probably save before. There we go. You can see it's relaxing. Okay, that's fine. Stop that. There we go. because I know it's going to be quite a prominent highlight going across this. I'm not too worried about that. And at the back of my mind, I know I've been, because it's quite a mossy looking stone here. I've been thinking I'm going to add a lot of moss on the underside of here, and possibly around these areas here where obviously it's close to the ground, so it'll be damp, so the moss is going to be growing up it. So I've been thinking in the back of my mind to hide a lot of the seams within that kind of the darker recesses of that formation. Okay. So I'm just going to do a couple more tweaks. It'll probably take a bit longer, so you don't really want to see that. I'm just going to skip to me exporting this UV out as a template for you to paint upon in Photoshop. So let's get that started. When you're finished laying out your UVs, I've just tweaked them a little bit more just to fit them in the space more efficiently. You don't ever want to go outside of here, otherwise it'll start tiling over itself. You then want to send them into Photoshop, so you can do this within the UV editor. What we do is go over to Tools here, and right at the bottom is Render UVW Template. I'm just going to save this at a larger size. So there's the width and height of our template. You will not need to adjust any of these at the moment, so just bear them no mind. All you want is this button at the bottom here. So let's keep things simple. Render out our template. So here we go. Let's bring that over. Okay, so I'm saving the image out, and for the moment I'll just put it in here. So that's there. I won't save it because I've already got one established there, and I've got it open in Photoshop. So I've saved that. You can close this. Most important of all, collapse your unwrap. Okay, so I've set a document up in Photoshop. It has the same dimensions as our UVW template that we just rendered out in Max, 2048 by 2048. This is actually the UV template here already. I've renamed it UVW. It's just a reference layer. We're not going to be drawing on it. It's just a toggle on and off so we can see the boundaries of our UV island template. I've set the blending to subtract. That's how it is usually, so that I can just see the wires. And then what I've done is I've brought in the concept, sampled a very neutral colour from the actual concept and used it as a base layer, which is down here. Then what I've done is I've just started setting up layers, and just this is one of those moments where here's one I prepared earlier. So what I'm going to be doing is adding in highlights literally over the highlight areas of the texture. So anywhere there's a nice edge, defined edge, give it a highlight. And this first off is just to establish where they are, so you know in your mind where you're going to be painting them. And then I do another layer. So that's just an example layer for the highlights. Here's one I made earlier. I'm going to have to turn a few layers off when I first open this. Okay, so you can see there's a lot going on there. Just ignore some of those for a second. And turn off our template. So there's the highlights I'm trying to establish to begin with. And one other thing that I would recommend, especially at this stage, to aid you in adding in your highlights and the recesses, the depth, is to render out an AO map, which Max, one of our other lecturers, has done a tutorial for, and it'll be available for you. So refer to that just to render out an AO map, which is here. And that's just going to help us to just find some of the edges and some of the depth. Okay. So using that, I've put in some highlights there, and then there's no blending on this highlight layer. It's just literally just painting straight onto it. And the same for now for this dirt. As I go along, I might try experimenting with pulling something in and pushing something back just to get a bit more of a desired effect. But that's part of the process. It's a bit of experimentation for some things. So you can see, I've kind of added some noise on the surface here using a brush, and I've established the recesses using another. So these brushes will be available for you. So this one, it feels like a marker pen, so I've actually named it marker pen. And you get a kind of a very smooth, it glides very well. It's a very smooth brush, so that you can have that on a separate layer just to help you just block in some lines to aid you to start with. The second brush, which is called Weird Spots, that is the one I've used to add in surface noise and just a bit of randomness. I find that when you have a brush like this, it helps you to kind of play off, to add cracks and highlights. Like I've established some highlights from almost joining the dots of this noisy brush, and it's a very fun process, to be honest, and I would encourage you to have a bit of experimentation with this and to have fun with it. You know, be productive though. So really try that out. So that one is called Weird Spots, which is this one here. Let's see if I just give you a little example. It is a very repetitive brush, but I just kind of dab it around. If I do find it's becoming a bit repetitive, what I do then is I add a mask here, and I just take away some of the detail. So let's just click on that mask for a second and just paint out some of the detail. There you go. And when black is active here, whenever you're on a mask, unless you're not familiar with them, so there's your usual colour swatches. When you click onto a mask, it's black and white. So black takes away from the layer, and white will add it back. I'll just undo that for a second. So yeah, that's the principle working there. The third brush is what I'd actually would use towards the end for getting more highlights in there. It's another similar noisy brush. What's this one called? I think it's called Concrete, actually. I'm not sure why I called it that. But yeah, it just it has a bit of noise, but it also has a kind of a bit of a sharpness to it. So it almost feels like chips and cracks along the edge. Like I say, you can use that sparingly if you want. Like I've kept a bit more of this brush along here as more of a sharper cut, and then I've established a bit more noise around the ends here. If you do actually, this is a strange, if you do actually study rocks, like how they look when they do, you know, when they have been chipped or something, you can kind of get that kind of impression from it. So I'm telling you to go study rocks. So there you go. The fourth brush which we've got here, I'm going to have to turn this layer back on here just so we can see. Also because my colours are up here. I'm just going to sample these. That's, if you have a brush active, if you hold Alt, it brings up the eyedropper, which is also I on the keyboard. But back to brush, and I want to sample that as well. So the way I use this brush is it's quite specific how it works. Initially I would block in a bit of darker tone. Let's just go and pick that. So it's kind of a bit blobby, kind of random. It's quite fun to use. So as a base, starting off that, this is to establish our moss. Then I would press X, switch to the light colour, just start adding a bit more lighter shades there. When I'm happy with that, to get these kind of highlights here, it can be a bit destructive, but if you experiment with it until you've kind of got a handle on exactly what you want. I've changed the mode of my brush here. It's similar to the blending modes in your layers. It has a very similar effect. So if you do that, you'll notice there's a highlight around there. Press return afterwards to stop that. So I just do that again. Color dodge. You can see it's like selected. Just press return. And what I'm going to do here is just paint in a few highlights, because you do find on hand painted textures some of the highlights that you know will be facing up are painted in, because they're not relying on normal or specular maps. Not always. So yeah, that just adds in a bit more. Like I say, these things can be destructive if you go a bit too far, especially with something like color dodge, because it's basically just pushing everything towards white, and the further you add onto that, the more towards white it's going to get, and it's very hard to pull it back in without just painting over it again. So like I say, when I'm happy with something, I just establish a little bit more of a highlight on top of there, and that's how I'd use that brush, and I find it quite fun to use. So yeah, have fun with that, especially establishing exactly where you're going to have your moss on there. I tend to avoid putting it around such clear edges in the texture there where there's a seam. I would usually just build it up around somewhere like this. I'm going to tend to use it around the back side of this rock, because this is the front part of the concept, which we know from this. So for the base as well, I'm going to darken that off with moss and have kind of a uniformed dark band here, just so we don't get any seams as well. So that's basically a starting approach of how you would do your hand painted textures. Let's just turn these off. And the UVs. So that's basically it. It's very simple to begin with, and you may find with most artists, everyone works a little bit differently. Everyone has their own approaches to certain things, like they'll use specific blending modes on their layers that they feel has a better effect. Most of the time they're all working towards the same goal, really, but it's just how you prefer to work. So that's what you're trying to establish right now. You're trying to find what you think is the most efficient way of working, and it's a long journey. I know a lot of good artists who are still every day finding new and interesting methods of getting the better results. So yeah, and this is a good starting off point, really. So just put in some time to experiment with those brushes and have fun. Okay.